let's get started. So clearly, this is the second week of lab, our second Thursday of class. And for the first time, you're both being assigned a lab and a homework. So let me share my screen real quick. And because of awesome enhancements to Zoom, they have temporarily, well, I need to figure out the workaround, but I cannot share my entire screen. I know there's an option, but I don't think I can modify it while this is live. I think I can only do it through their web interface. So let me share the right browser window, should be Chrome. And if you could let me know that you're actually seeing what hopefully looks like uwyo courses. All right, wonderful. So let me also hope that renders nicely. It's a little narrow for the moment. Okay, so first off, in uwyo courses, under the actual assignments area, you should all be able to see within the lab spaces the notebooks directly. I've added a link to the notebook. So if CoCalc or anything else completely goes crazy, you'll still at least have access to the raw files, okay? So you can download those, and by the end of today's lab, you should actually be able to even run them on your computer without needing any external service, right? So you'll see the lab here, and the same thing with the homework. Also the same thing, like if for some reason you're having trouble uploading things to CoCalc, you can upload things back to uwyo courses, right? So if for some reason you go to upload anything that's been asked of you and you can't do it, just upload it to uwyo courses. I'm not going to hold it against you if there's a technology issue with CoCalc. All right, so having said that it's all on uwyo courses, if you head over to CoCalc, that's going to be your better experience for the moment. So right now I'm in a student view. I'm looking at my own folder, and everything is under assignments, okay? And under assignments, there's now labs and homeworks. So under homeworks, it'll be labeled, there's only 5 of them this semester, right? There's only a few short homeworks at the beginning of the semester just to get you into the practice of doing certain things that we're going to need for the labs, actually, and for basically side channels in general. So when you open up homework 1, what you'll see is I basically give you some ways that you can work on it, right? I've tried to be more explicit based off of what happened last week and things that came up. Basically tried to be really explicit on where you can work on the assignment and how you can submit it. And then basically the instructions. Since there was a lot of confusion with that, the raising error or raising of a warning in the in that other assignment, I did try to minimize the use of that. And actually in the homework, I actually switched over to question marks and random X's, right? So when you try to execute some of this code, I mean, just follow along with the instructions, all right? And the shift enter still works as expected. But when you go and you try to run some of this code, it will yell at you, right? And it will tell you invalid syntax, all right? That should be a pretty good indication that there's something you should do. So any cell that doesn't work, I mean, there's likely something for you to do. With that said, there are instructions on what to do for each part. So there's 2 parts in this assignment, and then there's basically instructions for each one for this homework. When I reference a cell number, and I mentioned this last time, it doesn't necessarily align to the small little number on the right-hand side. It references a comment at the beginning of a cell, because that will always be the same. If you were to add, so the reason why I did that, some of you might be questioning like, hey, wouldn't it have just been easier if you had just used the number on the right-hand side? Problem with that is the moment that you go ahead and add in a new cell, it changes and renumbers everything. on the right-hand side of the cell. So the only way I could work around that to be consistent was to number the cell that I was talking about with a comment. Okay, so that's pretty crucial there. But if you follow along with the instructions, basically in cell 8, do this thing. I also try to tell you at the top of each cell what I'm asking you to do. I mean, I've tried to make this pretty self-contained. But yeah, so it looks like a lot, but really there's a handful of things to try, and it's really exploration again, learning how to do some of the math that we need within this environment. Okay, so this should be pretty fun. Again, when you have some issues, you can use the chat. It is a homework, but again, it's maybe atypical from other homeworks in other classes. You can reach out, collaborate with others. When you collaborate with others, in one of these very top cells, actually the very first cell that you can modify, there's some metadata here that has collaborators. You can see that on my screen. Let me zoom in a little bit. Is that a little bit better, bigger for those of you on looking at my screen? So as you work with people, I really don't mind, but just add them into your list of people that you've worked with. All right, awesome. All right. Okay, that's all I have about the homework. I mean, it's pretty sequential in nature. There's not many major leaps. There are a couple links in there for you to find additional resources, but here's another really big thing that helps in CoCalc and actually when we set up our own Jupyter notebook. Under the help menu, so file, edit, view, insert cell, kernel, help, there's actually basically a really nice treasure trove of resources here. And one of the things that we're going to use quite a bit in this homework is NumPy. So if you click on it, it will open up the reference to NumPy, right? So a lot of the help is built, quote unquote, built in, plus you don't need to go searching for it. You can, obviously. I do recommend some advanced Google foo as needed. But I do also try to give you some direct links throughout the assignment. So somewhere down in, so give you some hints in terms of places to go visit, out looking at different distributions. In case you don't remember those, it's okay, don't worry. References to specific NumPy things that you might need. Again, I try to give you some hints along the way so that if you get led astray in your Googling, perhaps these links will help you directly. All right, we're all here for lab, not to talk about homework, but I did want to at least bring it up. All right, in looking at the lab from last week, there are a few, two points that I'd like to at least address before we move on to the excitement of setting up our own instance of Jupyter and basically this virtual machine that's going to connect to our ChipWhisperer. And that's basically about variables and definitions and how they actually work in these notebooks. So I'm going to type in a variable here. I'm going to call it Mike. Actually, before I even do that, I'm going to attempt to use a variable Mike. I'm going to just try to print it out just to show you that it doesn't exist. All right, Mike is not defined. That is pretty awesome. That's what we expect. If I say Mike equals 1, that's great. And if after that, I print Mike, I expect to see 1. So that works as expected. Now, here's the thing. You go back up to cell 1. In theory, in a top-down linear approach, Mike has not been defined yet, right? If this were actual code, this should break, like it was traditional, but it does not, right? There's Mike equals 1. Okay, let me clear my output for a second. I'm just going to come here and I'm going to, should I be pretty harsh about it and clear it all? Let me do it this way. I'm going to comment out print Mike 1, so there's no output. I'm now going to comment out the assignment of Mike equals 1. And I'm going to come back up to this top line and I'm going to print again Mike equals 1. Actually, let's go to the one below it. I'm going to put out Mike equals 1. I'll even run this cell. So you can see that the number 7 here. So I just ran this commented out line. I ran that cell. What is the expected behavior if this were regular code? Error, right? That it should say not defined. It's still 1. Okay. I set Mike equals 1, and that exists in basically the execution stack of this notebook. I'll go one step further. I will delete this line that says Mike equals 1, and I will rerun this cell. So right now it says input 8 on the left-hand side here. I'm going to rerun the cell. Basically, it's blank. It has no idea what I just did. And I'm going to print out this. I clearly have never defined it according to this notebook. I'm going to run it. And Mike is still equals 1. I'll show you another example. Foo is equal to Mike times 10. And let me then print foo. Okay, this clearly should not work, right? But it does. This is what I was trying to basically get at, is that variable manipulation inside of notebooks is atrocious. That is the one downfall of notebooks, is variable manipulation, and you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. Especially if you do crazy things like you set a variable to something, and then you're like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And then you type in a different number or whatever else, or you delete this and do something completely different and you forget about it. But somewhere deep in your code, you've reused the variable. Your code will work right now. Right? Do something that you cannot recreate later because of a weird state that your variable is in. And it cascades once you've used some other variable, like in this case, foo equals Mike times 10. Mike doesn't exist, but you've now modified it. Basically, what I'm saying is be incredibly careful with your variables and your definitions. And when in doubt, right? And when in doubt, the thing you can always do at the very end, or every once in a while, as long as the process beforehand didn't take a huge amount of time, you can do a restart and run all. And I guess in CoCalc, there's this really nice run all and stop on first error, which is nice. So here you go. It will actually not break as expected. All right. So again, I'm just pointing this out because it is a major gotcha. I know I've spent about 10 minutes on this now in conjunction with talking about the homework, but it is super important. And it's like I said, it's the biggest gotcha when working with enough harping on. Let's actually take a look at today's lab. I'll make sure I'm reading the chat as well. So is Jupyter best practice to do something like creating a state cell that sets up everything as a first aspect of the notebook? Yeah, so that's a great point. So yeah, that is generally what I do. I will have cells that set up the current state of what I expect. So I am much more careful. So I will have like a preliminary cell which sets a variable, or I'm very careful, especially if I'm doing loops of any kind. I will set my variables to their initial state before my loop, so that when I run the cell, I guarantee what the value is. So there's a lot more of that, a lot more of ensure that the value of a variable is what you expect it to be. So yeah, setting those up in a space is a really good practice. So yeah, it does look a lot different than normal programming. Yeah. All right, so with that, if we go to assignments, labs, lab 1, this lab is due next Friday. So all labs moving forward, you'll have week and a day-ish, right? I mean, a week and 16 hours to complete. The only lab that was slightly different was lab 0, because I wanted everybody to make sure that they had experience using Jupyter notebooks by the time we had our second lab. I didn't want anybody to be like basically a full week behind. So moving forward, everything is at least, it should be due on Fridays at midnight, 11:59, according to YOWeb. You know me. Get it in. All right. Okay, so lab one. Lab one, I will be upfront, requires writing one line of code today. All right. So lab one is light on coding. Where you write that one line of code will be important. We'll get there. I do want you to make some modifications to this first cell. So if you go ahead and open up lab one, and this will be in every lab and every homework moving forward. It's one of my genius ideas yesterday at some point. If you could go ahead and modify this to actually be your information, what will happen is this will actually generate a few things for you. One, when you run the cell, the very last thing that shows up is how many days you have left. It does a really quick computation between the due date that I will always change for you and the current date. That was maybe helpful, you know, provide some stimulus if you are opening this up and you're like, oh my gosh, there's only 1 day left. Maybe I should do something about that. No, and the other thing actually what's really important is it generates a seed value. And that seed value gets used in the random number generator. And the reason why is basically it allows you to each get unique results, but still be able to do the same process. So you'll see some slightly different things as you go through the notebook based off of that seed value. And by different things, I mean different initial values for certain variables, especially the ones that are generated using random numbers. Clearly, or I guess I kind of alluded to it, there's not much coding in this lab. And this lab is actually all about getting set up. So what you'll see is basically checkboxes. I really do recommend because when you go through here, you'll notice that there are 24 steps. They're just simple as download the latest version of VirtualBox. I should have maybe put download and install, but maybe that's an assumption made. So that's where we're going to start. So if you have it already, wonderful. If you don't, go ahead and download and install VirtualBox on your machine. And when you've got that done, if you could give me a thumbs up, that would be wonderful. I'm going to open up VirtualBox as well. I'm going to share my screen for that. So all these links should work, by the way. So when you're in here, you should be able to click on all of them. And just in case people are having problems with CodeCalc, I'm going to be super generous and paste no longer working. What was the question there?
Less a question, more I had been having issues with 7Z extracting properly, so I just sent out what I did to fix it in case anyone else ran into the same issue.
So can you give the highlight of what you did?
Yeah, so if I did the extract here option in 7Z, the extracted folder would just disappear. And I couldn't find it, VirtualBox couldn't find it. So if I did the extract files option and then chose a specific directory, even if it was the same directory, it worked fine. So I don't know if that was just my computer being dumb, but yeah, just in case anyone else sees it.
Oh, thanks. The way that I have usually used 7-zip is actually to open it directly and then find the file that I want to unzip, because I too have had, say, interesting things to occur. So there's the link to download VirtualBox. There should be versions for all operating systems. I guess let me do this as well real quick for everyone. Let me create a quick new poll. It's really gonna make me edit it in their web interface. gonna launch a poll here real quick, and it's just gonna help me. What OS are you using? Spectacular. Right. My Linux users, there is a little gotcha potentially, and it's I do list it. And it'll be when we actually when we go to add your virtual machine, there is an additional note. Okay, all right, that works. No one's using them. Okay. All right, neither am I. So once you have VirtualBox installed, I mean, anybody not have it installed yet? I could see by like you have it, give me a thumbs up, either on camera or in the participant actions. Okay. And if you don't, give me any other symbol. Andy, you gave me a check mark. That's not a thumbs up. Now what do I do?
I don't have check marks. I don't know if my Zoom is outdated or if it's because I'm on Ubuntu, but that's what I got.
I'll take it then. All right. Okay, so let me share again. So the next link is the extension pack that you can install. So the two ways. Let me share my. I guess I should share my VM instead of not even my VM. I should share my. I could share more than one. Is it gonna let me? Oh, let me know what. Some windows will not be shared until they're moved to this screen. Oh. So Zoom will let you share multiple screens, but only if they're on the same window. That is weird. Okay, I have no idea what that renders for you. What does that look like? Do you see two screens?
Yeah, it's like a desktop just without the desktop part of it. So they're like two next to each other.
Okay, I'll take it. I guess they really don't want you to share your desktop icons. Okay. All right. So if you have VirtualBox Manager open, the next thing to actually take care of is downloading and installing the extension pack. So that extension pack is extension.vbox-exe pack. And that should just nicely install if you download it and open it. And the one that I have is basically the latest version. You probably can't see the window that just popped up, I'm guessing. You can't see anything that popped up, did you? On my screen. Right. So basically what happens if you download the extension pack and open it, when you open the actual extension pack, it will relaunch a version of VirtualBox, and it'll basically give you I mean, if it's already up to the latest version, it shouldn't do anything. Otherwise, it'll give you some message saying, hey, you want to upgrade to the latest version. And click yes. So let me know if you see that. After you download and open, what do you see? Or if you've seen it pop up. Does it do anything? Again, I'll continue posting these in the chat as well, just in case people are searching or not enough. If anybody's getting an error, what kind of errors might you be getting? Because I do know that it doesn't always open nicely. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to assume through step 2. Okay. So has anybody gotten any errors through step 1 or 2? So basically installing VirtualBox or the extension pack. So with step 1 and 2, are we good? Okay. Step 3 is a 2-part step. So I'm gonna, just so that I keep up with what I've done. By the way, in these markdown cells, you've got to go and so all right, so I see a couple messages in terms of sometimes if the hypervisor or VT isn't enabled, that can prevent the VM from opening. And you have to enable it in the BIOS. So that's a really good point. So we're gonna, I did not consider that. Thank you, everyone. We're gonna have a good time. So, all right, let's start with step 3 and make sure you have the latest version of ChipWhisperer downloaded. I've given a direct link. Yeah, you might need to restart. Yeah, I know. So that this will be good. The other thing that, by the way, will happen is if you are running, I think which tool chain will cause this to break. If you run, what is it that will sometimes, like there is another virtualization engine that will cause a lot of this to break and you kind of switch back and forth. If you don't use VirtualBox often. Yeah, no worries, everybody. I will let you all, I'll do that. Are these all my Linux people? Just curious that are dropping. Partially. Windows as well. Okay. All right. I will wait. Don't worry. In the meantime, let's make sure that everybody has it's still on. Download ChipWhisperer. And if when you try to open this, right, if you just try to double click it, it breaks, you're going to need to download 7-zip. Okay, so downloading ChipWhisperer VM is great, but more than likely, I have no way of guessing a percentage, but you probably don't have anything that can open up a 7-zip file. So go to 7zip.org, so step 4, and go ahead and download it. And yes, that is great for Windows people, depending on, or for Linux people, depending on what operating system you are in. You can do a yum install or an apt-get install. So if you are in Ubuntu, doing, I don't know if it's the native app, anybody on Ubuntu? Can you tell me if it's native or not, if it's already in there?
At least the extraction manager on Ubuntu can handle 7-zip natively.
Perfect. All right. So, all right. So basically, if you're on Ubuntu, you should already have a way to unzip it. And if you don't, there's Shaya's explanation if you're on a Linux machine as well. But in Windows world, for sure, the instruction that I have. So, all right, so let me open up my version of 7-zip for everybody else. Okay, so what I would do is after you install 7-zip, let me share. This is gonna look great. Let's see if I can trick Zoom to letting me share yet one more window. I don't know why they just don't let you share your whole screen anymore. All right, can everybody see 3 windows now? One at a time. So what you should have when you open up 7-zip, you should hopefully, it's not a great interface, but you should, it should only list, well, the first thing, you should navigate to where it downloaded. So for me, it's in downloads. I think navigation looks terrible here. So when you come to your downloads or wherever the file might be, just go ahead and find the one thing that ends in 7Z. All right. It should be ChipWhisperer.Jupyter. And since I've downloaded it before, I've got a 1 here, but not a big deal. And we're going to extract that. And I recommend not extracting it to your downloads folder. I would recommend picking any other place to download it to. But I'm just going to download it to my main root directory for my username. But as long as you know where you put it. So if you put it in downloads and you never delete your downloads, it's okay. It's not great, but you can do that there. And I'm going to extract. And I know you can't see the screen that just popped up, but it is extracting it. All right, and Connor mentions that he got his VM to work by re-enabling virtualization technology in the BIOS. So, Connor, just for everybody's, we'll say, education, can you tell people what kind of system you have and how you got back into the BIOS?
Yeah, so I have and it might depend like on what motherboard you have and stuff, because I put my computer together and all that. So, but I had an Asus motherboard and I was using Windows, and basically, you know, you just enter the BIOS for the F2 key or the delete key or something like that. It'll tell you. And then I went to the advanced settings tab, and if you scroll down, you'll have, I think it's Intel virtualization technology. And I think my theory is that every time you update Windows, it disables it, because I would enable it, and then when I update something, it would disable it again. So I got it re-enabled that way, and then I just restarted the computer, and that's how I got it. And it might be different based on the motherboard you have, but if you look up the motherboard online, it'll probably tell you how to do that.
Absolutely. And so the other thing is, if you have a laptop and discovering what motherboard you have might be a little bit difficult, but what you can do is you can do a search online for basically your specific laptop brand / say version quotes, and do a search for entering BIOS settings. So that's perfect. And that usually does happen on a reboot. Windows at one point in time in life had an ability to actually force the next reboot to go into the BIOS settings, but offhand, I don't actually recall if that's still a thing or if they disabled that feature. Okay. Yeah, so Charlie, that is a great link. And the reason why I didn't start there is because when you look at their instructions, say they're less than clear upfront, but yes, you can go in there, and we are definitely doing the virtual machine VirtualBox settings. The alternative is the Windows installer method. So if this crashes and burns for some people, like right, if there is, if for some reason we cannot get your virtual machine to work, there is an alternative, but I'd much rather try to work with you to get it working through a VM.
Yeah, I was posting that more for once we get it working in VirtualBox, their instructions for porting it over to VMware, if that's what you use more than VirtualBox.
Perfect. That is perfect. And that is that down at the bottom?
Yeah, it's at the very bottom.
Yeah, they have, so under advanced, at the very, very bottom, there is how to use VMware if you have it. Thank you for that, Charlie. That is a great thing, and I will actually also post that in my courses for those that aren't with us. Okay, so I know some of you are probably stuck, whether or not you're saying it or not, either with rebooting or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the next step, but then I'd like to basically if anybody needs it, I'm gonna try to go into a breakout room. I won't move anybody else. And if you need to, I think you should be able to hop into the room and ask me questions, share your screen, do whatever we need to. So I'm gonna leave you all in here after I go through the next step to just continue running through. But I'll basically create like a little come on in and chat with me space. Okay, so let me back up one second because I know some of you are also still having trouble with the unzip process. Don't try to unzip the file directly. So don't try to go to your file manager and double click on the file. The recommended way to try to unzip it is to definitely open up 7-zip on its own. So open up 7-zip. So in Windows, I think you can probably just do a search for 7D. Actually, it's 7-zip manager as the app. Open that directly and do the extraction process. All right, I'm going to move on and I'm going to come back one-on-one with anybody that's having problems. After you unzip, you go back to your VirtualBox manager, and this is going to answer hopefully Addison your question here in a moment. You're going to go to machine and add. Right, so normally a lot of times you might do a new or something like that. This is all self-contained and you don't actually have to change any settings whatsoever. So you don't have to modify memory settings or anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to machine and add. And you're going to find wherever you, you extracted your 7-zip file. So for me, I did a ridiculous thing and put it directly in my downloads. But basically what you're searching for, wherever you unzipped it, you're going to find a folder. And within that folder, there'll be logs and then a file that's called ChipWhisperer.jupyter.vbox. So that is what you're searching for. You are searching for ChipWhisperer.jupyter.vbox. And that is what you're going to add in. And why is it failing for me? Oh, one second. I'm going to be bold and I'm going to delete my current VirtualBox. So you cannot have two of these ever going on at once. So I'm going to delete the one that I so preciously created. I'm going to lose all the work I've done. Oh, okay. Okay. Can you see my screen? I now have 0 virtual machines left. I've deleted all my virtual machines. So I'm going to go machine. I'm adding. I'm not doing new. I am adding, to be crystal clear. I'm locating the one that I just downloaded and unzipped. Yeah. All right. And ta-da! I basically added it, and now you should see ChipWhisperer Jupyter is right here. And it has a whole bunch of settings that are here, right? You can see it's a Debian operating system, base amount of memory, it's 2 processors. I'm just reading down these parameters here. And if we actually go into, I'm just going to show you one quick thing, and maybe, I don't know, hopefully settings show up correctly. Can you see the window that just popped up with settings or not? Yes, wonderful, okay. So there's actually some fun things that they are doing under the hood. Find it, that would be good. Should be under USB. So when you go under USB, do not change anything. But what I want to show you is that they are doing some filtering to pass through some USB connections from your host system to the virtual machine. And they're specifically doing these UAE technology things, which happen to be the devices, the ChipWhisperer devices. Right? So you don't have to mess with anything here. I just wanted to show you that they're doing some nice filtering and they're capturing information from the USB devices. All right. Okay. So I didn't change any settings whatsoever. I added it, and I'm going to hit start. Now let me know if you see this. I'm guessing the new window is not going to show up. Do you see the new window or not? I'm guessing it's one that I'm going to have to add to. Now, do you see hopefully a screen? Okay, wonderful. The login is vagrant. It's in the instructions. And I'm gonna here in a moment, like I said, break out and help anybody individually that needs help. Okay, and you're asked for one thing. It's to enter a password. Let me tell you right now, if you do not remember this password, it's not the end of the world, but I can't help you directly. This password is not something obviously that I will ever see, and it's never stored anywhere. Getting an error on start. That's a good one, Peter. Has anybody seen that error? We asked if the default system for the virtual machine is Linux. Absolutely, and there is no way to change it. It will be, but don't worry, we're not going to use the virtual machine much. We are, but it's going to be behind the scenes. Charlie, do you have a question?
Were you asking me? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I
I
don't
was
have
just
a
going to tell Peter that he may have Windows feature Hyper-V or hypervisor platform or subsystem for Linux. Any of those will mess with VirtualBox if they're enabled.
Yeah, I'm on Windows.
Yeah, and check your, so go start and search for Windows features. And open up the turn Windows features on or off.
Okay, yeah. All right.
And then if you have Hyper-V, virtual machine platform, hypervisor, or Windows subsystem for Linux turned on, that can mess heavily with VirtualBox. Do like your
Virtual machine, Windows hypervisor platform is off. Oh, there you go. Windows subsystem for Linux. That is on.
try disabling that or any of the
Okay.
others that happen to be on.
Anything about Linux.
Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. So just to move us along, but again, we're going to come back through. What is the default for the virtual machine? We need username and password. Yeah, so the username and password are both vagrant. So
Oh, now I gotta
the
start.
yeah, we'll see in a little bit, Peter. The password, username and password are that. Okay. And then once you log in, you've got to set a password. Don't forget this password. And by the way, this is running on your local machine. I mean, you don't need to make it ultra complicated. I know that's not good security advice, but make it something you're going to remember. Right? If you want to call it ChipWhisperer, you can do that. Just so you don't forget it. I tried to get creative once, and I think I did like some random thing with whispering that I promptly forgot it the next time I needed to get in. There's ways to bypass it, but please know that if you forget this password, there'll be some steps involved in terms of rebooting your virtual machine, logging in, and running a command. That's impossible for anyone, but it's frustrating when, yeah. Okay, so typing in there, which is good. And you type it in, and that's it. But that is what you have to do inside of this virtual machine. And now you need to reboot the virtual machine. That's also in the instructions here. So the instructions basically are, we're basically here setting up a password. And the next thing is to reboot by doing a sudo reboot. And literally, we are done with what we need to. Within this space, okay? So once it reboots, you can, I'm gonna wait till it fully reboots, sorry. I'm gonna then let you continue on with phase 2. So once it reboots, you're gonna get the login screen. You can minimize your virtual machine, you no longer need it. Don't close it, minimize it. Right, so in your VirtualBox Manager, it should still be running. You can now go to a browser window in Chrome or Firefox only, please. Otherwise, you're going to get some really fun problems. Chrome or Firefox, and now head over to localhost :8888 and type in the password that you just set. And then you can move on to step 2. Let me know with a thumbs up once you get there. And I'm going to, like I said, create breakout rooms with nobody in them. And you can join me for one-on-one help, or keep posting questions, issues that you have. So I saw Andy made it all the way through. See the only one. Anybody else get all the way through? Wonderful. Yes. Is communicating with Chrome. It's just enjoy. All right. So yeah, once you basically get to this Jupyter interface, you are talking to your virtual machine. Okay. I want you to run through the remaining phase 2. So basically, once you get to this screen and you see docs, hardware, Jupyter, all these things, you're accessing the ChipWhisperer virtual machine that is running a Jupyter notebook. You can upload notebooks, right? So this notebook that we've been working on in CoCal, that's also on Wild Courses, you can, in theory, upload it here if you really wanted to. We're going to use this because it's going to really let us communicate with the ChipWhisperer Nano in a nice way, in a nice controlled way. But like I said, go to phase 2 and run through the instructions. You're going to work on 3 different notebooks that are already all coded in. You're literally going to add 1 line. And it's on line 14, basically, where I tell you what you need to do. So at the end of each notebook, I want you to basically do a file print preview. There are other options that you might try to do to get PDFs. They will not work without additional work. But if you do a file print preview and then save the page as a PDF, that should work. Okay. Print the page off as a PDF, that should work. So if you do that, that's what you're going to need at the very end, right? Is to print off, and it basically tells you when to do that. So before I move on to breakout rooms to help individuals, what questions do you have? Do you have questions, concerns, big issues?
So I'm still getting this error when I hit start.
let's see. What happens when you do a right click on the machine and do a show log? Do you see anything in there, Peter?
Show log.
So right click show log. Do you see?
Yeah. Resetting and changing the VM state from destroying to terminated. Console machine changed. Let's see. What's at the beginning? Oh man, this is a lot of trash. This is 1,843 lines of log in
Okay.
About 8 seconds.
Wow. Okay.
I'm reading this right, or something like that, or 823. I don't know.
Wow.
Oh, this is, no. I see what this book. But it's still hundreds of lines.
Okay.
I think. I don't know.
All right. Can you share your screen, Peter?
Perhaps. Choose. Nope, not that. Come on. Video settings. Choose virtual. Oh, there's right there. Just what do you do? Just share everything.
Oh yeah, that's no longer an option, Peter. See?
Yeah, excellent.
Right. If you just share.
Are you seeing that?
But that might just be
We're
me.
sharing.
Maybe it's me that's.
So I think I'm getting an error when you are running like step 15.
So for those of you that are moving on in ChipWhisperer updating, which is the first one you should try to do. When you come here and you try to run 12.2 and you hit Shift Enter, it should break.
And it does. But I'm saying like when you run the next one after you add the git reset, like hard reset, it's still.
I get the same error too, actually.
I got errors on that where it said something about you not having a remote origin, right?
Mine's saying something about like you need a branch or something.
Yeah, I got the same thing, and I don't know what I did, but I noticed between that red block and the code block that it actually said it did something. And then it just kind of started working.
So I actually had like that same error. I fixed it when I added a after the %% bash, I added a CD ... to go back to the root, and that got it to work for me.
Maybe it's because I did go run cell 18 again, so I probably inadvertently did the CD ...
Yeah, it works for me now too when I add the CD ...
So if you actually run cell, let's see, the next cell that does a checkout of the training version, that actually puts you in a different space as well. And so if you run them all, and I mean, basically, if you run the next one, so the first error is complaining because it says you're not on a branch. If you run the one in 1.4 and then go back, it will actually also update. So the red ones are not all, I mean, like, yeah, it doesn't like, sometimes if you try to do a poll before being on the training version, ultimately when you run, once you get it on a branch, it'll be back to the one. I'm not sure, yeah, why that 1.3. It probably also has to do with the fact of doing that get reset part is an unintended consequence. That get reset is probably putting you back in a space that it didn't expect. But that's the only way to get around the other errors that they produce. So the big lesson here, by the way, is that ChipWhisperer is the brainchild of a, I mean, it's right. This is not 100% polished by any stretch. So I totally get it. We will work around all those things, but yeah, just know that there are many notebooks that are built into the VM. We're actually going to try to not use many of them. We're going to, I mean, they're good at informational places to go and do things, but just know that they are not perfect. All right. So do not assume that these are just, oh, I can go use them and it's all going to be great. Okay, so let me see, Peter, let's start with you in terms of, you're still getting that exact same error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Didn't add anything to the logs. What? Come on.
Let's see. I'm gonna try to get that error again. Let me see if I can find it and see what other people say. I'm afraid of the one answer I've seen, by the way, because I'm afraid that it's going to put your system in a state that you don't want it to go into.
All right.
Like there
I
is an
could try
option.
doing this on my Linux computer, I guess, if this isn't working out.
That shouldn't really be. That shouldn't be the difference. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Okay. Here's what I'd like you to try.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop mine real quick. I'm gonna just in a very bad way. It's fine. Do you see at the top once it's on? Do you see new settings discard? Is the discard active by any chance?
No, discarded is grayed out.
Of course it is.
I don't think I've gotten far enough to have anything to discard.
Well, I was hoping maybe that was like a saved state that it was.
Yeah.
Even they usually have great things. And you didn't change any of the settings?
No.
All right, just for kicks, can you remove and re-add it in? What location do you have your ChipWhisperer in?
It's in with the VirtualBox.
Other VirtualBox ones?
Same. Yeah.
Okay.
Should I delete all files?
Yes.
Okay. Failed to remove virtual. Oh, come on.
Well, hey, wait, what was the warning? Failed to remove it?
Although it is gone from the list on the left side here now. So.
Okay, so now, yeah, so now I would go ahead and try to do a machine add again.
Oracle, VirtualBox, ChipWhisperer VBox. Is there? I feel like there's.
Okay, the other thing that I'm going to ask is if you can extract that VirtualBox image to a crazy place like the desktop, just for fun.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting the same.
Yeah.
Not having the same error.
Same error or different error?
Same, well, let's see. I didn't like to see if it was exactly the same, but the initial text is the same.
Okay, then yeah.
Failed to open a session.
Okay.
It doesn't give you. Oh, really? Failed. Oh, okay. Here, let's just get that. Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing to try is you can right click and see if you have a discard saved state on it. Probably not. It's probably the same thing as this card.
Oh, okay. I just deleted it again and was gonna extract
So
to somewhere else.
Okay.
I'm gonna put it somewhere where did it go? Not there. Just documents.
All right, so the next big thing that people might come across, by the way, are problems with getting the actual USB to connect. And my suspicion is it's going to be bigger problems on Linux than Windows. So within the instruction set, when you head over to if you head up the instructions a little bit and go to the read the docs under instruction 6.
Okay, that worked. Putting it under documents.
Worked.
Yep.
Insane. I'm glad. All right, so if anybody gets a really strange error, yeah, that could be it. If you get a really strange error that said, what was it?
Failed to open a session for the virtual machine ChipWhisperer Jupiter.
Yeah. So when you get that, try extracting to like documents or someplace like that. Who knows? Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So if you're having issues with Linux and not reading it, there's a handful of things to try. And what you can do is go onto the prerequisites. So ChipWhisperer prerequisites, and make sure that you have, honestly, the one that's probably the biggest one is the live USB dev make, although you shouldn't have to do this. The other thing to consider, like if you are really having some problems, is looking at your hardware drivers in Linux. Andy, do you want to also say what you had to do? I know you're about to restart, so. Maybe it's gone also. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going into, so if you need one-on-one help, send me a message and I'll pop into, there's a breakout room now. You should be able to move yourself in there if you need to.